In this video, we are going to explore two horrifying cave traps that mercilessly took the lives of their admirers. Starting with this national park, where Floyd Collins was trapped in 1925. It began in late 1924 when William Floyd Collins came across Sand Cave in the United States. It was in a Kentucky national park near the highway. There was no solid entrance to the cave, and the tunnels were quite narrow. It makes the cave quite dangerous, so no cavers dare to exploit it. This gave Collins a business idea. He was an experienced caver, so he thought of widening the cave to turn it into a tourist attraction. He made a deal with the landowner and started working on expanding Sand Cave. For days he dug the rocks and tried to widen the entrance. On January 30th, 1925, he ventured into the cave. The weather was cold and snowy. He took his kerosene lantern and ventured into the tight space of the cave, known as the squeeze. The opening was just 9 inches tall, so small that even a child would have difficulty passing it. But Collins decided to take on the challenge. He lay flat on the ground, pulling his body through the tiny space by pushing with his feet. The walls were lined with sharp gypsum crystals that scraped against his body, making the journey painful. However, he continued the journey. At last he squeezed out of the other side. In front of him there was a narrow pit that was the size of a chimney. Collins climbed down the pit, careful of the cave structure. On the other side of the pit there was the main entrance of the cave. It was the place that could turn it into a tourist attraction. Floyd was rejoicing in the victory, feeling excited about his new business venture. But then he noticed that his lantern had started flickering. He had to get out of the cave soon, so he climbed back into the pit and reached the upper surface. To his dismay, the lantern fell from his hands and crashed to the ground. Now Floyd was in complete darkness. But he decided not to panic. He thought, "I know this place, so I can easily get out of here." He began pushing his way through the narrow opening, but fate played a cruel game with him. A loose rock fell on his left leg, trapping it in a small crevice. At first Floyd thought he could free himself, but the more he struggled, the more rocks fell on him. Eventually his whole body was pinned underneath rocks, making it impossible for him to move. He called for help, but there was no sign of it. The whole night passed like this. Darkness and humidity were making his body weak and cold. He was trapped roughly 55 feet below ground. The next morning, 2 property owners came to check on Floyd's progress. They found his hat and coat hanging in the entrance, but no signs of him. They became anxious and started looking for him in the cave. Eventually, a 17-year-old boy named Jules Estes braved the narrow passages and managed to reach where Collins was. He was still awake and asked the boy to call the rescue teams. Collins' family and some friends arrived. Efforts began to provide food and water, and calls for rescue went out. His brother braved the narrow passages to provide food and water to Collins. He also remained with him for long hours to cheer him up a little. Over the next few days, people tried to widen the passage or free the rock, but repeated attempts failed. Using ropes or harnesses to pull him out risked severe injury. By February 4th, everyone knew that ropes and harnesses could never take the caver out of his misery. So engineers and rescue leaders decided to dig a vertical shaft straight down to the chamber where Collins was trapped. Machinery or explosives were avoided because there was a fear of causing further collapses or suffocating Collins. So digging was done by shovels and picks. Progress was very slow. The shaft faced mud, loose soil, and boulders. Only 2 or 3 men could work at a time. By February 6th, it was just a few feet down. Even by February 14th, progress remained difficult with collapsed walls, water seepage, and dangerous conditions. Throughout this time, Collins occasionally received food, water, and a temporary lamp supplied via ropes. By February 16th, 1925, rescuers finally reached Collins. But it was already too late. The man died of cold and exhaustion. They were just too late. On October 13, 2007, 8 people entered Nam Talu Cave, present in Thailand's Khao Sok National Park. The group included 2 Thai guides and 6 tourists. There were 4 Swiss nationals, a 10-year-old boy from Germany, and a teenage girl from the UK. The cave is famous for its constant water flows and underground river. That's why tourists were advised to visit this cave during the dry season. Unfortunately, that small group of cave explorers didn't know about this warning. They set the day for the cave explorations, checked the sky that was clear and blue, and entered the cave. In doing so, they didn't check the weather in the nearby areas. Rainfall had occurred further upstream in the nearby mountains, where the cave's watershed begins. As the cave has a sensitive drainage system, it is highly sensitive to upstream flooding. The group entered the cave in the afternoon. As they stepped deeper into the cave, they noticed that the water level was slowly rising. Guides found it weird, but they continued. Minutes later, a flash flood surged through the tunnel. The water rose quickly and flooded the narrow sections of the cave. The passage was narrow, and the flood was filling it quite quickly. Thai guides shouted at the group to climb a slope toward the higher ground. Some managed to climb, but some failed. The water filled the cave quite quickly, leaving no room for airspace. Gradually, everyone started drowning. Only a 16-year-old teenager from the UK survived. She climbed the rope, remained on the higher ground to avoid the deadly water trap of the cave. After 16 hours of waiting, rescue teams approached her. She was the only survivor, while others were swept away by the flood. This tragedy gained widespread national attention. The government decided to implement the policy of not visiting this cave during the rainy season. For years, locals and tour guides respected it, but eventually they started dismissing the risks. Exploring the cave during the rainy season became a sort of thrilling adventure for them. And this adventure took another group of tourists into the cave during the rainy season. On August 6, 2024, a group of 22 people and 2 Thai guides ignored the warnings of the government and went into the Nam Talu cave. They entered the cave in the afternoon. The tourist company made sure that the weather was pleasant that day. They explored the cave and made their way out of it around 5 p.m. But then, water rushed into the cave from the mountains. The whole cave flooded within seconds. As the group was on their way to the exit, it rushed outside the cave. All the tourists and 1 guide managed to escape the deadly water trap, but, unfortunately, 1 guide didn't make it out. The water swept him away. The body of the 37-year-old guide was found on August 8th. Rescuers tried to save him, but unfortunately, the vile water trap of the cave suffocated and killed him.